Today is Thursday, May the 2nd, and remember we closed yesterday and we had this bad news on the Fed, and I thought that that was overdone and that we would see a rebound this morning. Well, we did. We saw the Dow open higher, we saw the NASDAQ open higher, we saw the S&P 500 open higher, and then we saw bad news creep in again, and the market dropped mid-morning. I wasn't around all day. I was out of town and not even expecting that I would get to do this video, but the decliners led the advancers by 52% to 42%. And we said that yesterday we'd probably start the oscillator, down at the previous low, and that's exactly where we were. We're going to go lower today because of this 52 to 42. We're going to go lower. We might go as low as this level here. So we're going to be testing lower oscillator sentiment. So let's just take a quick look at things. The S&P, very interesting. Where did we hit our low? Right here, where this gap that we drew back on April the 12th, we touched that gap and we found support. And that's what you see happening pretty much all the time, is that there are going to be buyers waiting at the top of a gap. But it doesn't mean that that'll last forever. That will be tested again. And we're going to go down and we're going to look for buyers at 28.88. So that may happen tomorrow, may happen next week, or it may happen the week after. But we are going to test and we're going to fill this gap. And given this market, it's not going to take very long to do that, in my opinion. So let's just draw another tool. Let's just draw another gap in here, and the reason that I think this gap is going to be filled is because there's another gap below it, and the market in fact there's even another one here. So there's tons of gaps to be filled, and that's what happens. Vacuums get filled. So we've got 3 gaps. Let's watch for this one. Let's close this. Apple down $1.42, below 209. The only thing I have open now is 6 contracts of next week's 205 puts. I got rid of my short 210 puts yesterday. And you remember that I sold all of my stock last week before earnings, and we had this pop. But we also have a gap with Apple. And Apple is like every other stock. It abhors gaps. We could go back in history on Apple and see that it loves to close gaps. Now this gap down here at 172, that's going to survive for quite a long time. I don't see that one being filled anytime soon. But I do see this one possibly getting tested if the market continues in this weakness. And let's look at this old Fibonacci here. The bottom of the gap is almost at 68.1%. So those two would correspond quite nicely and prove to be a good level of support for a bounce. Caterpillar, despite the good news this morning of them raising their dividend to $1.09 per quarter, I forget what percent that's going to be. I think I read it would be 2.5%. Could be higher. It still suffered today. And where did it get its support? Buyers were sitting just above the cloud. So where we saw this bounce Friday of last week off the cloud, we pretty much saw that happen today. We saw buyers sitting just above the cloud and brought the stock up a little bit, so it didn't close off of its lows. But that's not good news. I suspect that is sellers saying they're trying to prop their stock up with dividends because they can't do it with revenue and earnings. And that may be true. It's going to take some really good news on the European and the Chinese negotiation fronts before Caterpillar is going to see any kind of a rebound. Intel continues to suffer. WDC is still getting support off of the cloud. Remember, my stock is being covered by 50 short calls. They should expire tomorrow worthless. And Whirlpool is coming up to that point where we had our eye, which is this trend line. We're going to see resistance possibly tomorrow at this trend line, but we did see the Chiku span break through the 200. Now the trend line is where? Sorry, the trend line is right here, and look where that is. It's right at the 200 SMA right here. And that's also where the top of the cloud is at next week's. This is a weekly, so next week's is the 200 SMA. So the top of the cloud corresponds with the Chiku span on the 200 MA resistance, and the top of this trend line corresponds with, well, not quite, but the 200 SMA, this trend line, and the top of the cloud are suspiciously all aligning in the same places. So we're going to look at Whirlpool as a potential buy and a move on the housing market. But we're going to see how it behaves at the trend line, at the top of the cloud on the weekly basis, and resistance of the Chiku span. So let's just keep keeping an eye on that. And we want to take a look at anything else. Gold, still disappointing. Google continues to suffer. Look at that. Google has lost cloud support now. It's lost candle support for the Chiku span. So let's go out to the week, and we're coming down to the flat cloud. I think we said last Friday or Monday that this flat cloud was going to attract, and I mean, it is. So we are going to look for Google to get support at 1138. I'm not going to be a buyer at that price, but people who do trade Google should be looking for support at 1138.